I've talked about just how backwards Donald Trump's priorities are when it comes to policy before, but we recently got a story that truly demonstrates not just how backwards he is in terms of what he should be prioritizing, but how morally depraved this individual is. So, as Caitlin Dixon of Yahoo News reports, the Department of Health and Human Services is diverting millions of dollars in funding from a number of programs, including the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the National Institutes of Health, to pay for housing for the growing population of detained immigrant children. In a letter sent to Senator Patty Murray of Washington and obtained by Yahoo News, Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar outlined his plan to reallocate up to $266 million in funding for the current fiscal year, which ends on September 30th, to the Unaccompanied Alien Children Program in the Office of Refugee Resettlement. Nearly $80 million of that money will come from other refugee support programs within ORR, which have seen their needs significantly diminished as the Trump administration makes drastic cuts to the annual refugee numbers. The rest is being taken from other programs, including $16.7 million from Head Start, $5.7 million from the Ryan White HIV/AIDS program, and $13.3 million from the National Cancer Institute. Money is also being diverted from programs dedicated to mental and maternal health, women's shelters, and substance abuse. According to data from the Office of Refugee Resettlement, obtained by Yahoo News, there were 13,312 immigrant children in federal custody as of Wednesday, September 19th, with ORR's existing facilities at 92% capacity. This is hardly the first time HHS has had to move money around to accommodate an influx of unaccompanied immigrant children in its care. But although the number of unaccompanied immigrant children apprehended along the border in the U.S. in fiscal year 2018 is on track to surpass that of the previous year, the rate is still well below those seen in 2014, when the flow of unaccompanied children across the border reached crisis-level proportions, or during the subsequent peak in 2016. And while the family separation policy has contributed to the demand for additional beds, the main reason is that children are spending more time in custody before they are released to a sponsor or returned home. So let's just pause for a moment and reflect on this administration's priorities when it comes to cancer research, an HIV/AIDS program, mental and maternal health, funding for the Center for Disease Control and Head Start. Those are all less important than having more detention centers for immigrant children that this administration is detaining. I don't really think I have to say much about this. I think the substance of the story speaks for itself. This is what this administration is doing. Diverting something as crucial as cancer research, money that's needed for that, to his xenophobic immigration policies. I honestly don't know what to say. This is morally reprehensible. Donald Trump is morally bankrupt. And he's choosing to prioritize punishing immigrant children instead of using that money for women's shelters and cancer research and Head Start. So in other words, he cares more about punishing immigrant children than helping Americans. That's his priority. I don't even know what to say about that. I honestly don't know what to say. There's no meaningful response I can give you to supplement this information. It speaks for itself. This is a morally depraved, disgusting individual who would care more about building more immigrant detention centers than these things. Now, another component to this story, not to sound too redundant because I always do this, but I think it's important, nobody's talking about this. Cable news has not talked about how this administration is diverting funds needed for cancer research and Head Start to building more immigrant detention shelters. Not being talked about. This should be a national story that dominates the headlines, but it's not being talked about. In fact, I found this in a subreddit buried, like not even at the top of Reddit, in a subreddit, not even at the top of that particular subreddit. That's how little people know about this. And it's so frustrating because this is one of the more disgusting things that he's done. This is a substantive critique that you can lob against this administration. And for a media that's always criticizing Donald Trump, this is something that you can criticize him for that's actually substantive, that's meaningful, that everyone would agree with you on. But instead, we're not hearing anything about this. It may not be a very flashy headline or, sensationalist story, but it's important. It really speaks to the moral depravity of this administration and how Donald Trump's priorities are completely ass backwards. But I think few people will learn about this. And it's so fundamentally important because this shows that Donald Trump doesn't give a damn about the American people. He cares more about punishing immigrant children than he cares about you.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.